Lucia, how are you?
Hey, Yaman, how are you? I'm okay. I'm fine.
Good. I'm trying to get here. I'm okay.
Yeah, I can hear you right.
Okay, perfect. Well, Marcus is selling off today. Are you short anything?
No, Yaman, unfortunately, it's against my nature. But I'm looking to buy something when the price is low enough.
Against your nature. What's your nature?
Well, Yaman, my nature is to buy a company as if I'm investing, like in actively buying a part of that company. Like I'm like if I own a partition of it. And my job is to look at opportunities, look at companies that, in my opinion, have high risk rewards, companies that I want to be involved in, and I want to hold the shares of those companies. I know it doesn't really make sense for you, but it's how I see things.
Thank you very much for letting me know that audio quality is good. Thank you. It's really awesome when people remember to let me know at the beginning without me even asking. Just fucking amazing. Makes my life so much easier.
Man.
What's going on?
Hey man, I just pasted you a link. I'm watching FSD drive around in China in rain, and I must say it's quite impressive. Have you seen it? If they can get people in China to pay for it, I think they can get a ton of money. I mean,
yeah. Have you ever seen that video that there's a guy, a chef, cooking with two anchors, and then she's like, "Well, if this recipe had this and that," and then he gets offended. This Italian chef gets offended, and he goes, "If my grandmother had wheels, she would be a bike."
Yeah, it's quite funny, but I'm impressed, man.
Dude, I think if you think the Chinese are gonna pay for FSD, you are fucking out of your mind. And you should not be on my speaker board.
I mean, just check the video, man. It's quite impressive. I know that
it's not about that. It's not about that. There's a lot of things that are impressive that people don't pay for. Okay, thank you, FT. I appreciate you trying to bring some new perspectives here. But anyway, all right, let's get started. I want to be nice to people. I really want to be nice to people. Wall Street indices pair declines on hopes of tariff reprieve. Chip stock slide. Man, this Reuters article that I published at noon. So since then, the stocks have sold off, obviously. But let's kind of go through this. I usually have a couple of items here. Wall Street's main indices traded off sectional lows on Thursday after a cabinet official hinted that the U.S. could take a softer stance on tariffs, while chip stocks declined as investors were disappointed by Marvell's forecast. Lucia, did you see that Marvell forecast?
I saw the gigantic sell-off, and I saw that they had a weaker outlook, but it didn't seem anything tragic to me. So I didn't think the sell-off was because of that.
Yeah, I mean, people are trying to figure out why it sold off. It's down about 20. It was down about 20%. Let's see what it is right now. Down about 17%. And the stock in the last month is down 38%. From the peak, it's down 42%. So in the last month, I think these chip stocks have been selling off in conjunction with each other. I think NVIDIA has a lot of catching up to do, honestly. I don't think NVIDIA still is a bad stock to short here. Down about 5% today, $111 per share. Let's continue. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said in an interview, I don't really care what this guy said because I think he's on his ways out. I mean, every time I listen to his interviews, it's like, doesn't make any sense whatsoever. However, worries that the president could alter his stance continue to dominate sentiment at a time when the U.S. trade deficit widened to a record high in January. Tariff-sensitive automaker GM and Ford were down about 1% each. Tesla fell 4% following a report that brokerage Baird named the electric car maker bearish fresh pick. Interesting. That's the first. Bearish fresh pick from Baird. I haven't heard about that. Did you hear any of the Tesla bias influencers talk about that today?
No, not really.
Let me see if Sawyer posted this. Bearish fresh pick by Baird. Nope, nothing. Tesla Baird. Has anyone? Jones posted Tesla Baird cuts Tesla target, names bearish fresh pick. Baird lowered the firm's price target on Tesla to $370 from $440 and keeps an outperform rating on the shares. The fuck does that even mean? Based on the week inch, so the target is 370, but in the near term, it's lower. That makes no sense. That makes no sense. I don't see any of our usual bearish, the biased influencers posting this, which is always interesting. All right. I guess they didn't have the green light to post this news from Powers to be. Tariff sensitive automakers GM and Ford were down about 1% each. Tesla fell 4% following a report that brokerage Baird named the electric car maker bearish factor. The uncertainty created by rapidly shifting policy pronouncements can damage investment in particular and hurt the economy, said Bill Sterling, a global strategist at GW&K Investment Management. And the other thing that investors are concerned about is the size of the tariffs. This is way beyond what was experienced. Blah, blah, blah. I don't think it's going to change the tariffs here. I don't think the market will allow it. Marvell fell 18% after the chipmaker forecast first quarter sales in line with analyst average estimates, which failed to excite investors who had expected stronger AI. I don't think that's the problem. I think the margin came in a little lower than people expected. Broadcom and NVIDIA also fell, pulling the broader chipset index down over 3%. Concerns about overspending and overcapacity in the US AI industry in the face of China's cheaper DeepSeek models caused Wall Street's bull rally in January. The tech-heavy NASDAQ is now down about 9% from its record high. Philadelphia Fed President Patrick Parker said that the trouble may be brewing for an economy that is currently in good shape but showing signs of stress in the consumer sector and risks to the inflation outlook. That right there spells stagflation to me. The Philadelphia Fed is ringing the bells of a potential stagflation, ladies and gentlemen. First announced here by our own Jimmy. And when he said it, I kicked him off. I kicked him off the space when we first said it. And it turns out he was right. So what does that say about my hosting skills? That's not good. All right. Comments from policymakers Raphael Bostic and Governor Christopher Waller are due later in the day. Kroger rose 4% after forecasting annual same-store sales largely above estimates. Declining issues outnumber advanced by 2-1, etc. Traders now see Federal Reserve lowering borrowing costs by 25 basis points for the first time this year in June. I think they actually moved it to May. Let's check that real quick. In 13 days, 7% probability of a 25 basis point cut for March meeting. In May, it's about 45% to 55%. So it's basically 50-50. And by December, we have 3 cuts priced in. I don't think it's going to happen. I think market is going to head itself when it comes to, man, look at this. Foe is here when Bill is talking in the trading day. That's the first. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that wild? All right. Luce, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, yeah, man. I'm looking at few stocks, but they are still too expensive for me. I think also there is this news of Queen, an LLM with only 32 billion parameters that rivals, for example, DeepSeek 600 billions in some tests. I think the AI is moving to the edge, and I think that it's moving to the edge fast. That's what I think.
Okay. AI moving to the edge fast. All right. Broad come down 6%. Yields are up a couple of basis points today, actually. The 10-year treasury yields at 430, 5-year treasury at 408. Initial claims, I mean, looks like the initial claims are not signaling a recession at this time, but continuing claims are at 1.9 million combined with ADP. That's not a pretty picture for March. But yeah, we shall see. Mixed signals from the employment market. I don't think the Fed can cut into this. I mean, I don't think March, April, May, I don't think they can cut into this. So rates are going to stay high. And I think we're going to continue to see pricing weakness from Tesla. And I think that it's possible that Tesla may have a negative gross margin soon. So we're seeing in the old Model Y units an $8,000 price reduction, $8,300 price reduction for old Model Y. That's an incentive level that is unheard of. I mean, that's getting close to like 15, 20% when everything else is combined with financing deals and FSD free trials and referral credits and everything. We're talking like a 20% incentive level for a Model Y with already low prices. So the ASP on Teslas now is coming it's like $40,000 now, and the sales are declining. So low prices combined with high incentives, combined with low production capacity utilization, that could spell out a negative gross margin if the Fed doesn't start cutting soon. And I don't think they're going to start cutting soon. So, Luce?
Yeah, Yaman, I wanted to ask, so just to understand what you're talking about, what really is the problem? I know it's not optimal, but what is the problem with cutting rates when inflation is at 3%? Is that bad?
Of course, you lose your credibility. So next time you say, we're going to get it down to 2%, nobody's going to believe you.
Okay, but long term, it's a problem or it's only about credibility? Just trying to understand, really.
I mean, credibility is everything. So if you lose the credibility, it's like, I don't think people realize how the Fed functions. The Fed doesn't set interest rates. The Fed influences interest rates. So to the extent that you have any credibility, you lose credibility, then you're kind of screwed. You can't influence it at all. So they're not going to cut rates until we get to 2% inflation rate. We're not at 2% inflation rate. I mean, even the forecasts for March is like 2.9, 3%. Q1 analyzes high. Wage growth is still high. So I don't think, inflation expectations are surging. I don't think the Fed is in a position to cut interest rates right now. So to the extent that the market is pricing in cut for June or May, I think they're kind of getting ahead of themselves here. Go ahead, Luce.
Yeah, man, I'm trying to ask you this because I also would like maybe the listeners to understand it better like me. So my understanding is that the rates that Fed imposes basically influence the rates that the bank can give out, because the bank will give out rates that are just slightly higher than the rates of the treasury, my understanding. And so I don't see why it's only credibility. I think it should have a material impact, those rates in general, in the economy, in the amount of money that is circulating through debt. So am I wrong?
Sorry, I'm not sure what the question is. Can you ask it in 10 words or fewer?
Well, I need to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, the best way is to just kind of talk to your favorite LLM and then, think out loud while typing and then say, can you ask this in the 10 words or fewer? That's the best way to do it.
Okay, I will. Give me a second.
Ekti?
So just so you know, I'm not a huge fan of Tesla or anything like that. But my only question is, why don't you think that people will pay $100?
Well, because first of all, you can't eat on the speaker board. And then secondly, Chinese automakers are giving it away for free. So, Chinese automakers, like for example, SU7 and YU7 are better in most ways, if not all ways. I mean, the key way range is better. Better than Tesla options, Model 3 and Model Y. And on top of that, they're including LiDAR-based better ADAS systems for free that can drive on the highway, on the city streets. It's more decisive. It doesn't really fuck up with lane selection. I mean, we all saw the videos of these Chinese ADAS systems that are clearly outperforming FLC, despite what the biased influencers say. So if those systems are for free and the vehicles are better and the vehicles are cheaper, I think it's kind of just it's wishful thinking to say customers will pay even $1 for FSD, let alone $99 a month or $8,000. Go ahead, XT.
Yeah, so that's a great point. I was just wondering, have you figured out why they're giving it everybody for free? Because I mean, it costs a lot of money to make this technology. So why would you give it for free? Like, it's kind of strange.
They're competing. Luce?
Can I read something from Grok?
Yeah.
Do the Fed rate cuts affect bank debt rates? It's just about credibility. To answer your question, yes. The Fed rate cuts typically influences the bank rates of debt. When the Fed lowers the benchmark interest rate, like the federal fund rate, it reduces the cost of borrowing from banks. Banks often pass this reduction to the customers and businesses, lowering interest rates and loans, mortgages, and other debt products. However, the extent of the impact depends on the market conditions, bank policies, and economic factors. As for whatever the Fed's discussions are just about credibility, it's more complex. The Fed's actions and statements aim to maintain trust in its ability to manage inflation and economic stability. Rate cuts signals policy shifts, but their public comments also shapes the expectations. Credibility matters. Markets react to both what the Fed does and what it says. Still, it's not just about credibility. It's also about real economic outcomes like employment
Luce,
and
is there an end in sight to this narration? Grok is not good. Okay, Grok is the worst among ChatGPT, Gemini, and a couple others. Claude too. Grok is kind of like, what it's like? It's just like goes on. It's on and on and on, saying the same thing. Like some of the speakers on some of these spaces, they just like keep going unless you interrupt them. The presentation is horrible. which Elon said is going to get better and stuff, but whatever. Even beyond that, what you read is extremely simplistic. It's kind of like just a regurgitation of what I read online from others. And there's no analytical thinking there. There's no critical thinking. And this is disappointing because he spent billions and billions and billions of dollars, way beyond what anyone thought, on GPUs. And on top of that, had the advantage of copying ChatGPT and others. Like he didn't have to go from 0 to 1 on anything. He just has to copy. And it still is worse. Like, did you guys not do anything different? That's supposed to be. And then on top of that, they had the audacity to claim that they are the best AI in the world, which is obviously bullshit. So it's just really disappointing. And then, so, I understand maybe that's your best LLM or whatever, but that's not what I asked you to do. I asked you to talk to your LLM and ask this question in 10 words or fewer, and then ask the question. So do you have a question?
Do Fed rate cuts affect bank debt rates?
Yes.
Credibility focus?
Yeah. All else equal, yes. But all else is never equal in macroeconomics. So in this case, even if the Fed cuts rates, I think it's more likely that it's not going to translate into lower borrowing costs for cars, mortgages, etc. There's a real issue right now, especially with car loans. The delinquency rates are at record highs. For 60 days delinquent is at record highs, according to data that came out from Experian this morning. So I'll turn this up here. 60-day rate 0.99%, new record high. 30-day rate 3.17%, highest since Q4 2009. And it's getting worse. This is Q4 data. Q1 is going to be worse. Okay. So in this environment, I think it's like you have an environment where people are falling behind on their payments, especially younger crowds like millennials are getting really hurt in this economic environment. On top of that, vehicle prices, interest rates are still high. It's just, I think it's premature to think Tesla sales can rebound here, even if the new Model Y, even with the new Model Y kind of coming around, I think it's a little premature. People are really uncertain. I mean, look at all these consumer sentiment surveys. Like consumer sentiment is down dramatically. People are expecting inflation. They're waiting for these tariff wars to end. Businesses don't know what to do. Like, where am I supposed to invest? I think one of the critical comments, or one of the most insightful comments, came like, I can't make a multi-billion-dollar investment for the next 4 years. So this is coming from a CEO, and that's the reality. That's the reality. Let alone 4 years, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or next hour. It's a shit show right now. Like, we have a commerce secretary that's going out there talking about how tariffs are not inflationary. I mean, you got to be, I don't know. I think what's going to happen is that these guys are going to get their heads handed to them in the stock market and the bond market, and then end up walking back and then claiming victory somehow. But we're going to look back on tariffs collected, and it's not going to be that different from last year, the previous year. Any other questions? Oil prices are down to $66 per barrel. Pretty uniform sell-off in the markets today, except for oil. The only stock I'm long is Oxy, and it's a very small position. It's just more of a macro hedge. Google is pretty cheap, I think, right now. So Microsoft, Google, and Apple are fair and better than the rest of Mac 7 today. Active?
So Are you thinking of buying any stocks in Russia, Ukraine if this conflict comes to an end?
No. Actually, are you eating lunch?
I just finished, so I was trying not to speak when I was eating. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I don't really look at anything else other than, I mean, I'm short these stocks because I think they are the most overvalued stocks in the most overvalued sector in the most overvalued asset class. U.S. equities are probably the most overvalued right now in the world. And semiconductors, Nvidia, Tesla. I just don't see how Tesla doesn't go below $100 per share, honestly. It's just that, no growth, negative growth for year after year, combined with declining margins and potentially, possibly negative gross margins. I mean, I don't know. I think Tesla could be like the Amazon of this cycle, where Amazon went down like 90%, 95% or something. It survived, but the stock still went down 95%. So I think we're looking at a similar situation there. And the Rivians of the world are just going to be, they're not going to be around. So, Lucia?
In my opinion, EV incentives will be removed as well. I know that doing so will be like catastrophic for Tesla and for Elon that it's partnering with Trump, but I think it's going to happen. And that's something that people should consider.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there was a bill introduced. I don't know where it stands, but there was a bill introduced to remove EV incentives. And yeah, I mean, without those, there's gross margin negative. All right. Any other questions, comments? Otherwise, we're going to end the space. I don't really need to be in the space. There are other spaces going on. I can just be a listener and chill. Listen and chill. I can't. Oh, there we go. Jimmy's coming up. Maybe we can go on for a little bit more. Jimmy, welcome. Jimmy Dial, there. Welcome.
Thank you, sir.
What do you want to talk about today?
I would love. I don't know. I saw that the delinquency is almost an hour old, but I would love to talk about that. For example, there's also a few other things we could talk about, including some of the new Chinese cars coming to the market, and then of course these tariffs for the car makers that has gotten an exemption.
I think I had enough tariff talk, honestly, but I would love to learn more about the Chinese market.
Sure. So LONGi, for example, is introducing its new EV SUVs for this year. Very exciting. Lots of smartphone gizmos inside of it. I looked at one yesterday. That was very exciting to see. I saw quite a few of the new ones in the parking lot of the mall I was at. And of course, I saw Aeon. I think that's how you pronounce the name, A-I-O-N. That's been quite popular in the city I've been in. So very interesting one. Also has magnetic suspension, and some of the models can do the tire go sideways, so you can do parallel parking.
Jimmy, can I yes or no? Tesla will not survive in China.
It will survive. If the Japanese companies can survive, I'm sure Tesla can survive.
So with Chinese, let's say YU7 and SU7, better in every way and cheaper, why would anyone go for a Model 3, Model Y?
Status, because they're more expensive. It matters quite a lot. People still buy BMWs and Lexuses and stuff, and Tesla's kind of considered to be like that equivalent brand. Yeah,
but BMW, Lexus sales are also going down, and Tesla is more expensive by only $1,000, $2,000.
I think you asked about surviving. So
right.
Yeah, they will probably do equivalently.
But the thing is, though, if Tesla is only using 50% of the production capacity, then it doesn't make sense for Tesla to produce cars because your contribution margin is going to be negative. So you're better off not producing. So just like other automakers are pulling back from China, pulling out of China, I think Tesla might as well.
That's a fair point. If they focus more on exporting from their China factory, they would probably do better.
Where are they going to
so-
export? You have a European factory.
They could. I'm sure you saw they're trying to make inroads to the Indian market now. If Elon can get some kind of agreement,
Indian
where
sales are going to come from European factory. They're not going to import from China. India won't import from. You should know that.
yeah, I was trying to give some ideas here. Southeast Asian market like Singapore, there's still some opportunity there.
Singapore is a small market, but Southeast Asian markets like let's say Indonesia, the incomes are so much lower there that I think Tesla is even worse, in an even worse position against BYD and other Chinese automakers in those markets, in the cheaper markets like let's say Latin America or Turkey, than it is in China, and it can survive in China. So I don't
I
know.
would caution people to not say that just because incomes are lower that people are poor. A nation of 250 million people, but there's still a lot of rich people in Indonesia. People may not believe that, but when you go to Jakarta, you see lots of BMWs and Bentleys and Rolls Royces and so forth. You still have 10, 15, 20 million people who make American incomes in a country like that. And that's true
Okay.
of many of those countries.
Fair points. I recognize the points. I will adopt that point. So you're telling me that Tesla China can still export from Shanghai to keep the production lines running to ensure positive contribution profit margin.
It's a possibility, but they need to work on their marketing. They really need to work on that.
Okay. Okay. Now the second statement I want to run by you is Tesla may have negative gross margins soon.
Yes.
Okay.
They made some bad decisions. Yeah.
Such as?
Well, when you don't like the Cybertruck, right? It's too expensive and it costs too much to make. And they intentionally made it more expensive than it needed to be in terms of how to make it. It's their own fault. They could have built smaller, cheaper cars. They could have focused more on that the last 3 years, but they chose not to. Maybe they will pivot and focus more on how to make cars cheaper to produce, smaller cars. So it means that they don't have to be negative margin forever, but maybe this is a wake-up call. The problem is in the luxury car market, you need to sell expensive cars with high quality materials, and they're selling expensive cars with relatively low quality materials, and still the cars cost quite a bit to produce. So they need to figure that out. I know I'm not saying anything new, but I don't think any analyst at Tesla can offer anything else as an analysis for this. Their strategy makes no sense. It made sense maybe 4 years ago, but not today, right? And I think everyone here would agree with that.
Where do you think they went wrong on Cybertruck? I mean, I had really high expectations for that vehicle.
Oh
But,
gosh.
yeah.
Where did they go right? Well, let's talk about the things that went right on. Okay, now let's talk about the things that went wrong on. It's too big. It's the materials inside don't indicate luxury. It doesn't actually have the features that indicate its price to be in the luxury market. Now, people will claim, well, there are similar EV SUVs and trucks that cost something around there. That may be true, but still it's more expensive. And it's not scalable. So if you make it smaller so that it can be something competitive in other markets, it loses so much of its bed space that it's no longer really competitive. It loses the aura of being a good truck. And I think those are the main issues. I would also add, going back to marketing, how the hell will Cybertruck ever be marketable in any non-American locale? I mean, that's a like if I was going to draw something up, right? In Italy, for example, there are trucks. They're quite small. Okay, I accept they may not sell to the Italian market. Fine. But what about the other markets, like Saudi Arabia? They have a lot of money. Sure. Still, it's too big. When you go to Riyadh, it can't even fit into a mall parking space. And Saudis own huge vehicles, but the thing is so damn wide that it wouldn't fit. I mean, the widest ones that they own are like expensive Land Rovers. Even it's wider than a Land Rover. So, I don't really understand how they got to the point where it becomes unsuitable. They should have looked at a luxury mall in almost every country that has money and figured out this is the way that a car or other vehicle can go around the levels. So you know how most luxury malls, you go up another level with like you drive on this like it's a plank, not a plank. You know what I mean, right? It's like you go from level 1 to 2. It's like a circular thing, but a Cybertruck can't go through that because it's too wide. Does that make sense? Like that's a big problem. And I would have said to them, you can't even do that. And in luxury condos, right? In most countries like Saudi Arabia, Hong Kong, so forth, it can't even fit into the when it goes through the gate and it has to take a right. It can't even fit into that parallel parking space either because it's too wide, so it stops other cars from driving through. I thought that was obvious, but apparently not. If they could do something about that, then maybe.
Have you ever driven it?
I've seen it. I've seen it in person.
So that's
I
a no.
measured it.
I
I'm sorry,
mean,
I don't have enough money, Yaman.
I like it. I mean, do you not have any friends? Come on. I actually really like it. I mean, I like driving it. Lucha?
And that's with Cybertruck is exactly when Elon became a weight for Tesla and a negative factor. If you read the biography of Elon, he went absolutely against the business in many decisions. This, or for example, the fact that the Cybercab was designed without a steering wheel, having a steering wheel in mind. I don't know if that changed, but in the past that was the case. Elon Musk, since 2022, has become a selling point, it's really hurting the business, and the Cybertruck is like the culmination of all of.
Okay. Ekti, you keep waving at me when you're supposed to be raising your hands. Are you on a laptop or like a desktop? Is it your phone?
No, man, I just thought it's irritating when the hand is up all the time.
No. Put your hand up because I may not see you waving. That's a temporary one.
Okay, sorry. Well, I can talk back about when Elon went off the rails because he first promised the Roadster in 2017 and then the Semi.
I don't want to just rehash things that we know.
Yeah.
So
he has promised quite a lot, to be honest.
Okay, thank you, Ekti. All right. Let's see what else we have here. Jimmy, so you think that we're going to stagflation? I think an increasing number of people are agreeing with you. Even the Fed officials started kind of talking about stagflation, and the recession probability in 2025 has increased about 45%, according to Kalshi. But at the same time, initial weekly claims are still very low, 220,000 as of today. And, I just don't see a recession starting before initial claims go up to like 300,000 plus, 350,000 plus. So the data says that we're not in a recession right now. How do you explain that discrepancy?
I explain very simply. Low growth is still a recession. Negative growth means a recession. But if growth... You see, this is the hard thing about explaining it because it's hard to find in the data, but people feel it. Now, you may say that I'm being illogical. I kind of accept that. Very few people agree with me. And as you said, some people are coming out and kind of agreeing with the idea, but they're not saying that stagflation, though. I think one of the arguments of stagflation historically is relatively low GDP growth that doesn't seem to have any potential of going up.
No. Stagflation means high unemployment rate, high and rising unemployment rate, and high and rising inflation rate. So
That is true. It comes though later.
okay. So you're saying that we're kind of stuck in a low growth environment. You're not saying that we're going to have negative growth. Is that right?
Yes. If people ask when does the unemployment rate go up, my answer would be when the faucet is turned off, and yet it's not been turned off yet.
Yeah. Which faucet?
Well, there are a couple faucets. One, of course, is the Easy Money program from HUD. Another one would be Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac if they get privatized again. The other one would be the MDSs that are still securitized and bought by PIMCO and pension funds. In the UK, I'm sure you're aware, under Liz Truss, there was a short liquidity crunch that occurred when the Conservative government basically said they're going to increase spending without increasing taxes. And there was a bond market shock. Many of the pension funds started to lose a ton of money because there's a haircut on their national bonds. That could happen with mortgage-backed securities. It doesn't need to happen with people essentially defaulting on the mortgage-backed securities. What happens is the book ratio for mortgage-backed securities, the haircut actually occurs on the books. And that will only happen if Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac actually get privatized for once, back to where they were supposed to be. And then they basically make less securitization at that point. The truth is, there's a lot less liquidity in mortgage-backed securities. I think people need to accept that. So there's a lot of evidence there. And as you said, you'd buy CDS.
Hold on. What evidence do you see that the liquidity in MBS is low?
Well, as you know, the Federal Reserve, through quantitative easing, would buy it in the case of a shock, right? And still buy some, correct? If they were to turn the faucet off and stop.
No, I don't think they're. I guess they're buying some a little bit. I think they're.
I don't think
exactly.
Let's be very clear in the mechanism here.
But the thing is, though, the spread between mortgage rate and the 10-year yield is at normal levels. I mean, it's at 250 basis points. So that's not I don't think liquidity is as low as you're kind of portraying right now.
Why are there less loans from banks than ever in the last, I think,
There's
slower than 7 years? Okay. So if there's less demand for mortgages, there's less MBSs, right?
Yeah, but when you say low liquidity for MBS, I thought you were talking about investor demand.
Well, there is that. So banks traditionally would buy, before the faucet 2008, would buy the MBSs instead of the Fed, right? The Fed has that mechanism where it has essentially an escrow for MBSs. It helps securitize them by backstopping them through Freddie Mae and Fannie. Okay.
Okay. So hold on. So basically, what you're saying is, back to my original question. Initial weekly claims or unemployment will rise when these government programs stop crowding out the private capital. Is that right?
Yes. And
okay,
if Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are privatized, there's no federal backstop.
Yeah. I actually did see a post the other day, yesterday, talking about how delinquency rates in FHA-backed loans is insanely high right now. It's like 15-20% or something.
It's pretty high.
I don't know if this is true. I didn't check the source, but I can definitely see it being the case. Okay, and then what else I want to ask you? Okay, so then you don't see, basically what you're telling me is you don't see initial weekly claims rising until after Doge starts making some deeper cuts.
I would say theoretically yes, but they're not going to be making those cuts. It is nothing more than press. I'm so sorry for anyone who believes in this, but the thing is they can't make deep cuts right now. It's impossible. They could make gradual cuts year by year for the next 4 years. I don't know if Elon's going to stick around for that. I don't know how he's going to claim victory. I don't know how he's going to justify this time of his. But they're not cutting that much, guys. I think the total amount was mostly foreign aid related and some other DEI spending. What was that? 1.5% of the budget?
Yeah,
is that cutting?
It's something like a few $1 billion they cut, I think. When they talk about $2 trillion, we're at a few $1 billion, which things can start slowly and then exponentially increase and everything. It's just that they're going to have to make some bigger decisions, tougher decisions about, we saw all the signs that the Dems were holding up with Medicaid, and it's just, I don't see, I agree with you on that front, unfortunately. I definitely don't
Isn't
see
their
the next,
main target just to reduce federal
I
employee
definitely,
count?
I definitely don't see it happening in the next 2 years, which is what they claimed would happen. So I think what's going to happen is they're going to kind of figure out their way in the first 2 years, and then they're going to go to midterms saying our work is not done, we're going to continue. And I just don't see Elon going back to Tesla anytime soon. I think he's silently quit Tesla. He's not collecting compensation, obviously. He's just the name, the brand, the image, and the CEO title, but I don't think he's doing anything. So that's why we're seeing Tesla's growth rate turn negative and competitive positioning worsen dramatically. And I honestly don't think robotaxis or Optimus is coming anytime soon, if ever. So when it's all said and done, in about 5-6 years, when he's 60 plus years old, how is it going to go back to Tesla? I don't see it. So, Jimmy, what do you think is going to happen to Elon? Is he going to become a politician then?
Well, no, I don't think he's bankable actually as a politician. And I mean that in terms of political credit. I don't think any local Republican Party would actually back him. That may sound insane, but I don't think Vivek might even win his primary in Ohio. People would be like, no, Vivek can win it. There are a lot of other local Republicans in Ohio who would easily beat him out. He may get more funding than them, but it's irrelevant, really. So he's not going to go into politics. He might try to get some kind of cabinet position officially, but I don't think he would even get confirmed. I know people might not believe this, but there are a lot of Republicans who don't want the richest man in the world soiling the Republican Party by making them officially the party of the ultra rich. And they'd rather keep him in an advisory role where he can never get confirmed. So what I think will probably happen is this. He will get some kind of position which doesn't require confirmation. And then after the midterms exit, then he will go and focus more on SpaceX. He will coordinate for a Mars mission, and he will finalize his legacy in 6-7 years where they do reach Mars. And I think at that point, he'll focus on AI and so forth. And I think Tesla is just air in the wind for him. It's just something that he did before. And he actually thinks it's politically toxic for him at this point. I don't think he wants to associate it. And he doesn't talk a lot about it as well, by the way.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly. It's just that, yeah, it's really weird. I think what people miss is even if Tesla went to zero, Elon would still be the richest person on earth through his ownership of other companies. So XAI, SpaceX, Neuralink, etc. I just don't think that he cares about Tesla as much anymore. I don't know. Or yeah, I think he's silently quit. Anyway, I don't want to dwell on this. We have another speaker. Jimmy, why don't you finish that thought and we're going to go to Wave.
I think it's going to be similar to Jeff Bezos' legacy, to be honest, and Bill Gates. It will be a wise man giving advice, pursuing essentially hobbies, and being photographed a lot, and speaking more often than they do. You can only imagine if Steve Jobs had a Twitter account, the crazy things that come out of his mouth.
Okay, what do you think one thing Steve would say?
Really? Well, knowing his personality from what I understand, he would speak a lot about, how he had a lot of crazy conspiracy theories, which apparently he had a lot at the time. He would talk about how evil other corporations were, despite the fact he also ran 2 big corporations. He would start naming and shaming his enemies, which he had a lot of. He wouldn't stop doing it. Lots of explicatives would be involved in those tweets. The guy was often high on LSD, so a lot of really crazy ideas would come out of his mouth. And he would be forced to retire from Apple at that point. I don't think there's any situation where Steve Jobs would be expected to take Apple past the iPhone 6. Don't think the board wanted that. Let's not forget, he didn't actually own much equity in Apple. And Tim Cook has done a relatively good job, I mean, in terms of stock price. So yeah, he would be crazy. Crazier than Elon, in my opinion.
What were his top 3 conspiracy theories? And then we're going to go to Wave. Sorry, Wave.
Well, he believed that the medicine was a lie, that none of it worked. It was only there to kill you. Unfortunately, that did kill him. He believed that the government was controlled by a small number of people who secretly were trying to undermine and sabotage his life. And he also believed that his enemies in Silicon Valley were essentially not real people, and they were basically spirits that were trying to do voodoo on him. He said that many times. So, yeah, he was a bit crazy.
Wait, sorry, what was the last one?
He thought some of his enemies in Silicon Valley did voodoo on him, spirit stuff.
Yeah. Wave, why don't you want to follow that?
Jimmy, are you in China?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, I thought I heard that. Do you mind telling us what city you're in?
Shenzhen right now.
Awesome. How long are you going to be there?
A few more weeks, then I'm going to go to Singapore.
Terrific. Vacationing or business?
I work here. I have no money, so I need to have a job.
Hey, don't we all?
Well, not everyone apparently on this space seems to have a job.
One question I had from you is since you live there, what is your outlook on, I guess, the implementation or scaling up robotics? I remember I used to see it even decades and decades ago in Japan, um, from hospitality to hospitals, mail delivery, even in our own company was done with robots, primitives. But where is the robotic, not necessarily humanoid, and that's coming, but basic robotics? Do you see a lot of that taking over?
It is. A lot of the regional governments are pushing local retailers to focus more on robotics in food services and construction. So in food services, I'm sure you noticed from the videos that there's robotic servers now, also robotic cooks. This is for a variety of reasons, but mostly because there is this belief that hiring people from third-tier cities and importing them into already extremely highly populated cities is bad for the economy, because at some point the revenue for tax is displaced by the cost of building infrastructure for them, and they're already maxed out. There's also a lot of problems politically, where I'm sure you're aware of the ID laws in China. You can't really change your ID easily, so you have to return to your home city at some point. And a lot of them are theoretically living illegally in first-tier cities, working in these hospitality, food service, and construction industry jobs. So they're focusing on that right now. So if you go around to these cities, it's pretty common to see this stuff, but not in the second and third tier cities. If you're asking about the trajectory of this stuff, it's mostly right now going to be in transition from food services and hospitality towards hospitals. And that will be basically to reduce the burden of doctors, because there's a shortage, as there are in most countries right now, of nurses and doctors. As you know, China's getting older, so there are nursing homes, etc., and there's not enough nurses to cover that. And they're basically saying, instead of spending X amount of money and scaling by finding new people to be nurses, they always say, no, we're going to use technology so that your parents don't wither away in a hospice without anyone noticing them. And that makes people feel content for now.
That's really good news that they seem to be ahead of the curve, similar where Japan was decades ago. You would go there and you could see the future in a sense that they realized. I remember going to Shanghai when there was no smog, and then a decade later you couldn't breathe. You had to wear a mask because of all the cars on the road. Everyone used to be on bikes before, and they learned that, and they don't have their natural resources and oil, so they're pushing heavily towards electric. And I'm really glad to hear that. Does this mean that they're now not promoting, or there is that wave of depopulation from distributed architecture they had with all the farmers and in rural areas, for them to just stay in their villages and help them reallocate resources in a better way and help them make a living there, as opposed to burdening the cities? Is
Are
the
you referring to
robotics?
the influencer farms where in small villages
Yeah.
there are videos where all the young people who are left in the village are doing influencer videos inside of warehouses as old people smoke cigarettes and watch them in bewilderment? They don't understand what's going on. You'll see a pack of 10 young people who don't want to leave the village because they have to take care of their parents, dancing all day for 8 hours, expecting donations from people in first-tier cities. Are you referring to that stuff? If you're not referring to that stuff, if you're referring to the Beijing government, regional government, forcibly closing factories and pushing the Fujian government to take them, that also has happened. And it's also one of the reasons why there's less pollution. But what happened to Fujian? There's more pollution. So they just kind of moved the pollution. So yeah, Guangzhou, Fujian, Shaanxi, and other places like that, they got all the pollution. They're also increasing coal power plants in those places because of the way that nuclear power and heavy load works. But yeah, in the places where politicians and high-end business people want to locate to increase property prices, it's clean air. Clean air. Now, there's another point that you made about reallocating resources. China, it has an ability to stimulus the economy whenever something's wrong. And that is essentially what they're saying with the tariffs, as I said before a couple days ago. The difference is, as you know, the regional governments distribute that funding. So when there's a huge surplus, the Beijing federal government, if you want to call it like that, basically lends money to the regional governments through bonds. And then those regional governments lend money to their regional banks and tell them what they invest in, right? Usually, traditionally, it's infrastructure to spur on construction jobs, to spur on real estate growth. They can't do that this time. I'm sure you're aware of why. They're going to use the money differently this time, they say. They have not explained how they're using that money differently, though.
What are we talking about?
He asked about China and how they're using the reallocation of resources using robotics and things like that.
But aren't they using the same in, let's say, Africa and the whole Belt
All
and
right,
Road
I'm
Initiative?
not interested in this conversation. Sorry, guys. All right. Is there anything else we're gonna talk about? Otherwise, I need to get off and then do my thing.
I don't know if you see him. Etza has his hand up.
He came up like 3 times today. But
Right.
all right, let's call it a day. Thank you very much, everybody. And I'll chat with you all next time. Take care.